The music stopped halfway through the fiddle's second verse. Chairs scraped, glasses clinked, but no boots moved forward. Not a single soul crossed the creaky wooden floor of the dusty lantern saloon. They all just stared. She stood alone beneath the swaying oil lamps. Her white dress, catching the low amber glow like a ghost, had drifted in from the plains. Tall, near as tall as most men, and lean in a way that made folks uncomfortable. Hair tied back, with a red ribbon, a faded scar across one cheek that nobody ever asked about, and those eyes, not desperate, not sad, just tired of waiting. No man stepped forward, not even the bold ones. Then came the sound of a chair sliding slow, deliberate. A boot heel tapped the floor, the kind of sound that turns heads before the man even moves. He didn't ask, didn't speak, just walked across the floor and held out a calloused hand. She looked at it, looked up at him. He nodded once and they danced. But let's go back to where it all started. The last town she passed through had a different kind of silence, one with bite, whispers behind curtains. Men pretending not to look, but always looking. Women clutching their boys when she walked by. She'd come through on foot, dragging a small travel sack, dust on her hem, sunburn across her shoulders, not begging, not smiling, just passing through. Name was June. Least that's what she answered when someone asked once in Cheyenne. Might have been her name. Might have just been a word she liked the sound of. She worked ranches when they'd let her, quiet with horses, quicker than most with a rope, and didn't flinch at the sight of blood. That got her a week's work out near Deadwood. But once the foreman's son got bold and grabbed at her in the hayloft, she split by morning, left a cracked nose and a black eye behind. Rode out with nothing but the clothes on her back and a bitter word trailing on the wind. 4 towns later, she came upon Widow's Creek, a mining settlement turned cattle stopped that stank of ambition and rot. Main Street was a split rail through dry mud and gambling smoke. She walked in just as the Sunday heat broke, and men started filing into the saloon like moths toward flame. Inside, folks barely noticed her at first. A piano played slow. Boots shuffled. A drunk coughed himself into a stupor. She found a corner, ordered water, and waited. An hour passed. The music got louder. Laughter turned cruder. No one spoke to her. Not really. Not until a rancher in a tan duster, too many rings on his fingers, swaggered up with liquor on his breath, and a smug lean to his grin. You lost, sweetheart, or just hoping someone takes you for a ride? June didn't look up. Not yours. The men at the nearby table hooted. The rancher's face colored. You got a smart mouth for someone sitting alone. I ain't alone. I'm with my piece. The bartender laughed into his glass. The rancher backed off, muttering something about wild fillies, not worth breaking, but after that, no one else dared approach. Until him. He walked in like someone had called him, slow, sure, eyes sweeping the room like he'd been here before in a dream. His coat was worn raw at the edges, dust caked in every crease, tall, broad shoulders, no badge, no arrogance. Boone Kessler was his name, though he didn't introduce himself. Men like him didn't need to. He ordered coffee, sat at the edge of the bar, listened to the music, watched the room, and when the fiddler started playing Wichita Moon, he stood. She saw him coming, didn't flinch, didn't brace. Just watched. He held out his hand, no words, no smirk, no challenge, and she took it. They moved slow. The way folks do when they're carrying too much they can't speak on. The music kept playing. Chairs creaked as folks turned to look. Nobody laughed. Nobody dared. She danced like someone who hadn't in years. He held her like he'd done it once with someone he lost, and outside, the wind picked up. Later, in the alley behind the saloon, the rancher with too many rings spat into the dirt, eyes mean and small. You see that? He said to the boy next to him. That's what happens when you let ghosts waltz with men. Sooner or later, someone's gonna pay for that. The boy didn't answer. Just stared after Boone and June as they walked off beneath the stars. The glow of lanterns fading behind them. Up ahead, Boone glanced sideways at her. "You staying long?" she shrugged. "Depends who's asking." He gave a small nod. "Then maybe I won't ask. But there's work. If you're not scared of horses or fences, I've done worse," she said. "And I don't scare easy." From a dark window, behind them, someone watched. Fingers curled around a curtain edge. A quiet mutter escaped, cracked lips, "She's back," and she brought him with her. The work was honest. Boone's ranch sat 10 miles west of Widow's Creek, tucked behind a low ridge that broke the worst of the wind. 80 acres of stubborn grass, one half-collapsed barn, a stretch of fencing held together by prayer and rusted nails, and a chestnut gelding with a limp. He called the place home. June just called it quiet. She slept in the loft above the tack room, cooked simple meals, replaced every rotten post in the south line without once asking where the hammer was. Boone noticed she never took her boots off indoors, always ready to run, like she'd never truly unpacked herself. Still, she smiled more. Just barely. Boone was a man of few words, but he worked beside her every day. Sometimes, their silences felt like stories. He didn't ask about her scar. She didn't ask why half the rooms in his ranch house were locked, or who carved the initials in the old porch swing. In town, though, the story wrote itself. Boone's got a wild one up at his place. Folks whispered over poker hands and fried beans. Some say she slit a man's throat down in Abilene. He's a damn fool. That woman's poison. It didn't take long for the town's discomfort to harden into warning. Boone stopped going in for supplies. Sent old Tomas. Instead, a toothless drifter who'd earned Boone's trust over long years and hard seasons. Tomas didn't speak much English, but he could read a room. "They don't like her," he told Boone one evening, sitting on the porch with a tin cup of weak coffee. "Don't like you much either now." Boone didn't answer right away. Just watched the sky darken, clouds smeared with red like a wound healing wrong. "You ever see someone fight the fire and walk away smelling of smoke?" Boone asked. Tomas nodded. "She's fire." "No," Boone said. "She's what's left after the fire passes." That night, a boy showed up on horseback, barely old enough to shave, shirt clinging to his ribs, blood crusted down one arm. Boone caught him before he fell. "Help, please, The boy rasped, fingers clenched around a satchel like it held the world. "They're gonna kill her." "My sister." He passed out before he could finish. Boone carried him inside. June boiled water, cut the boy's shirt away, and stitched his arm with hands that didn't shake. An hour later, the kid stirred, winced. "What's your name?" June asked, voice low. "Emmett. Emmett Raleigh." Boone froze. Raleigh was a name the town knew well. Caleb Raleigh ran half the valley's cattle and the other half's politics, owned 3 saloons and a church pew, in that order. His word carried more than some lawmen's. "Your PA know you're here?" Boone asked. Emmett's eyes darted to the door. He sent men after her. Said she dishonored the family. Said she'd shamed him, but she didn't do nothing wrong, just refused to marry that bastard preacher he keeps pushing. She ran. I helped. He found out. June stood up straight. "Where is she?" "Old sawmill. By the river bend, hiding. I came to find someone who'd help." BUT folks shut their doors. Boone looked to June. Her jaw was tight, eyes unreadable. "This ain't your fight," he said. June stepped past him and picked up her coat. It is now by morning. Word had already started to spread. Boone had been seen riding out with her. The Raleigh boy was at his place, they said. Folks started asking questions with torches in their voices. Sheriff Dwyer came up the trail that afternoon, not with a posse, but with a heavy silence that came from too many years of knowing when to push and when to stay back. "You really going against Raleigh over a girl?" The sheriff asked Boone quietly, hat in hand. "She's not a girl," Boone replied. "She's a person. He's got half this town in his pocket." "You really want to risk that?" Boone looked over at the barn, where June had just come out with a rifle slung low on her back, her braid whipping behind her in the wind. "I think I already did," he said. The sheriff sighed and put his hat back on. "You better be right about her." Boone watched him ride off down the trail. He didn't say it out loud, but the thought hung there like thunder behind the hills. So do I. That evening, June sat on the porch steps, gun across her knees. Emmett rested in the corner with bandages fresh. Tomas snored in a rocking chair, hat tipped low. Boone stood by the post, watching the sun bleed behind the trees. "You ever kill a man?" she asked, without looking at him. He took a while before answering. "Not for sport, not for money." She nodded. "Same." They sat like that a while longer. From the ridge, smoke rose, faint, thin, but deliberate. A signal. June stood. Time to go. And together, they disappeared into the dusk. Toward a sawmill, a girl who'd refused to bow. And a town that was about to learn what happens when you try to bury something that refuses to stay buried. The sawmill hadn't turned in years. Weeds pushed up through the warped planks of the loading dock. The water wheel hung still, dry as bone. Rust ate at the chains and iron teeth, and the big sliding doors groaned on their hinges when Boone pushed them open. Inside, it smelled of cedar rot and mouse nests. The light came in crooked, through cracks in the wall, slicing the dark like blades. June found her first. Tucked in the far corner, behind an overturned workbench, a girl barely older than 16. Her dress was torn at the hem, shoes missing, face streaked with soot and sap. But her eyes, those were fierce. She didn't flinch when June approached, just gripped the broken piece of saw blade like a knife. "Don't come closer," she warned, voice dry as gravel. Boone held up a hand. "We're not here to take you back." She looked past them, searching the shadows for someone else. "Emmett, he's safe," June said. "He's hurt, but he made it." The girl's breath hitched. She dropped the blade. "My name's Boone. This here's June. We're gonna get you out." "My name's Clara," she whispered. Boone nodded. "Clara. All right." They didn't rush. Let her stand in her own time. Let her wrap her arms around herself and walk out of that place like she was stepping into a world she didn't yet trust. Outside, the wind had changed, tasted of copper and dust. "Riders," June said. Boone heard it too. Distant, rhythmic, not galloping, not hiding either. That deliberate marching pace of men who think the law belongs to them. Clara's face went pale. "He found me." Boone scanned the ridge. 5 riders emerged, black hats, dusters, and long guns resting like threats across their saddles. At the center rode Caleb Raleigh himself, upright in the saddle, like a man born to judge and punish. They didn't shout, didn't draw, just kept riding down toward the mill, slow and certain. Inside, Boone said, guiding Clara back through the door. June didn't move. Boone looked at her. "June," she kept her eyes on the riders. "If we run, they'll chase. If we beg, they'll own us. Then what? We stand." Boone didn't argue. He walked inside, unwrapped the tarp from an old hunting rifle, loaded it with careful hands. June moved through the mill like she'd lived there her whole life, barricading windows, checking lines of sight. Clara sat in a corner, knees drawn up, trying not to shake. "They won't talk first," she said. "They'll just come." Boone crouched beside her. "They're not taking you." Her voice cracked. "They always do. Every time someone says they won't, they do." He didn't offer comfort. Just placed a revolver beside her, gripped toward her hand. "If it comes to that, you decide how it ends." She stared at it like it was made of fire. Outside, hooves stopped. The riders dismounted. Caleb stood alone in the clearing, arms crossed. His face was lined like a canyon wall deep, dry, unmoved by time. "Send her out," he called. Voice steady, not loud. Boone stepped into the doorway. Rifle loose in hand, June stood behind the corner post, unseen but listening. "You'll get nothing from this," Boone said. Caleb's lips curled. "You got no idea what's riding on this girl. She don't just dishonor me, she spits on everything I've built. That kind of rebellion spreads. I clean it now, or I lose the valley." "You ain't a king," Boone said. "You're a coward hiding behind a last name." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "I'll count to 10. "You always count to 10 before killing your daughter?" June asked, stepping forward. Caleb blinked. I know what men like you are, she continued. You don't kill with bullets, you kill with rules, with shame. You don't need her punish, you need her broken, so you can sleep. One of Caleb's men raised his rifle. Boone didn't flinch. Try it. A tense pause followed. The kind where birds go quiet, and time seems to lean in, holding its breath. Then, a voice broke the silence. I'm here. Clara stepped out of the mill, rifle untouched. Shoulders squared, she walked slowly, past June, past Boone, until she stood 10 paces from Caleb. You want to kill me, you do it now. I won't run again. Caleb's face twisted. Don't make me, I'm not making you do anything, she said. I'm showing them who you are. She turned to the riders behind him. How many daughters do you have? How many wives? Sisters? You really gonna shoot a girl for saying no to a preacher? One of the men shifted in his saddle, another lowered his rifle. Caleb saw it. His grip tightened. She's poisoned your minds, he snapped. Boone stepped forward now, voice low but clear. No. She freed M.A. The air cracked. For a moment, Boone thought someone had fired, but no. Caleb had drawn half a motion. A twitch of fingers toward his holster, but he didn't finish it. Couldn't, because none of his men followed. He looked around, alone. The weight of his name had vanished like mist. Then came the hardest part. He turned, silent, and walked away. Didn't shout. Didn't threaten, just rode off into the failing light. A king deposed by nothing more than silence and truth. Boone let out a breath he hadn't known. He was holding Dot. June walked up beside Clara and put a hand on her shoulder. You did that, Clara. Shook. I thought I was gonna die. June gave a faint smile. You still might, but not tonight. Behind them, the old mill creaked in the wind, doors open wide, like it had waited all this time to see justice done just once. They spent the night at the mill, though no one really slept. Boone kept watch from the loft. Rifle across his lap, gaze sweeping the tree line. June dozed lightly near the front wall, her body curled against her coat, fingers still near the pistol holstered at her side. Clara sat closest to the door, knees drawn up, blanket wrapped tight around her shoulders. She didn't speak, just watched the dying fire and listened to the night at some point before dawn. The wind shifted again, dot soft, warmer, like the land had decided to breathe. Boone came down the stairs, slow, boots careful on the boards. She's still awake? He asked quietly. June nodded, not opening her eyes. She hasn't blinked in hours. He crouched near Clara, lowered himself until they were eye level. You did a hard thing today, he said. She turned her head just slightly. He's still my father. Boone nodded. That don't make him right. A silence passed between them. I used to think, she said slowly, that if I was good enough, he'd stop being so angry. If I married who he told me to, smiled. When I didn't want to, prayed in the same voice as him. Maybe it'd stop. She swallowed. Her voice cracked, but it never stopped. It just got quieter, inside me like I was vanishing. Boone didn't say anything, he just listened, and then Emmett, she whispered. He grabbed my hand and said, run. I didn't even ask where. I just ran. She looked up at Boone, her voice suddenly small and hollow. Do you think I did something wrong? He didn't answer right away. Walked to the fire, stirred the coals with a poker, and added a split log. The flames rose slow, warm orange climbing like a breath. Then he said, I had a daughter once. June's head lifted slightly. Boone kept his eyes on the fire. Name was Miriam, red hair, freckles. Stubborn as a mule, and sweeter than honey. The wind outside paused like it too, was listening. She wanted to marry a boy who worked at the telegraph station. Quiet fella, real kind, but I didn't think he was good enough. Didn't wear a gun, didn't own land. I told her no. He stared at the flames, something behind his eyes hollowed. She left that night, took a horse and rode east. I told myself she'd come back, but she didn't. He turned then, looked Clara in the eye. You didn't do anything wrong. You chose yourself, That's brave, that's brave. Clara's lip trembled, and for the first time in days, she let herself cry. Not the gasping kind, not the wild sobs of fear, just quiet tears, slipping down her cheeks, like rain on a dusty window. June got up and sat beside her. No words, just the touch of one woman's hand against another's wrist. The sun rose slow. Pale gold light, filtering through the cracks in the old mill, touching the worn floorboards like a blessing. They rode back to the ranch, just after first light. Tomas met them at the gate, still bleary-eyed, clutching a pan of beans and muttering prayers in Spanish. Emmett sat on the porch, arm in a sling, his face breaking into light the second he saw Clara. They didn't speak at first, just ran to each other, arms tangled, the kind of hug that spoke more than words could. Boone stood, a ways off, watching June beside him. "You think Caleb's gone for good?" she asked. Boone shook his head. "Men like that don't vanish. They just wait, but he's not the same now." "No," Boone said. "Neither is she." Later, June brought Clara a change of clothes, something plain and warm. They sat in the garden behind the house, where the soil hadn't been tilled in years but still managed to grow wildflowers along the fence. "You ever think about leaving this place?" Clara asked. June brushed a bit of dirt from her jeans. "Used to, every day, and now," June smiled faintly. "Now, I think about what stays, what roots, even when it wasn't meant to." Clara picked a small white bloom and twirled it between her fingers. "Can I stay here?" "You don't need permission," June said. "But you'll have to work." Clara grinned. "Good." June stood and turned to go. But just before disappearing inside, she said, "You remind me of someone I used to be." Clara looked down at the flower in her hand. For the first time, in a long while, it didn't wilt under her fingers. That evening, the lanterns glowed soft across the porch. Boone tuned his guitar, playing a few broken notes into the settling dusk. Emmett read aloud from an old, tattered book of Psalms, his voice unsure but steady. Clara sat beside June, eyes watching the sunset, fingers covered in dirt from helping with the new garden rows. And for one fragile moment, there was peace. Not loud, not triumphant, just real, held together by silence and scars, and the unspoken hope that maybe, just maybe, the fire had passed, and what was left could bloom. The rains came 2 weeks later, not a downpour, just a steady, whispering kind of storm that softened the dirt and made the whole valley smell like cedar and turned earth. Boone stood on the porch with his arms crossed, watching it fall. The fields drank deep. The creek swelled, and the sound of it drumming on the tin roof became the new heartbeat of the ranch. Inside, June stirred the stew. Clara shelled beans. Emmett dozed near the hearth, with a dog tucked at his side, a stray that had followed him back from Widow's Creek and never left. They'd become something like a family, but no one dared speak the word aloud. Too fragile. Tenu Tomas was the first to bring news. He rode in from town on a mule and sat down at the kitchen table. Soaked and smiling in that tired way old men smile when they know something worth knowing. "Caleb's gone," he said, pulling off his hat. Boone looked up. "Gone." Tomas knew. Packed up and left, said he was selling off the south grazing land. Gave the saloon to the banker. No one knows where he went. Just ... disappeared. June leaned against the doorway, arms folded. "Men like that don't disappear. They retreat, maybe," Tomas said. "But the sheriff's walking straighter now." Preacher's voice, a little quieter, something shifted. Clara listened from the corner, hands resting on the table. "You think it's over?" she asked. Tomas looked at her. "You tell me, Nina, you feel safe." She didn't answer right away, but she didn't say no. That night, Boone brought out the fiddle, a dusty, cracked thing that hadn't been touched in years. He tuned it slow by firelight, his fingers a little stiff, the bow creaking with age. June raised an eyebrow. "You play?" she asked. "Used to. What changed?" Boone gave a half smile. "She asked me once why I never danced. Your daughter," he nodded, "said the war made my feet forget." I told her some things just don't come back. But maybe she was right. He played one song, just one. The notes were thin, a little off at times, but there was something honest in them, something that made the fire seem brighter, and the walls feel wider. When he finished, the room held its breath. Clara stood up, walked to the center, looked around. June met her gaze. Then no words, no asking. She stood, stepped forward, and took the girl's hands. They danced, slow, steady, in bare feet across a rough wooden floor. The wind outside sang against the glass and the fire crackled low, and for a few minutes, nothing else mattered. Boone watched. Something warm and distant flickering behind his eyes. They never danced with me, Clara said, voice just loud enough for June to hear. Back in town, they said I was too tall, too proud, not gentle enough. June turned them in a soft circle. You don't need to be gentle to be good. Clara looked down. You think I'll be all right? June thought about it. You already are. Later, after the dishes were done and the fire turned to coals, Clara stood outside alone. The rain had stopped. Mist rose from the fields like the land was exhaling. She walked barefoot across the porch, stood by the edge where the steps met earth. Boone joined her, handed her a cup of coffee. Neither of them spoke. A moment passed. Then Clara said, "Why'd you help me?" Boone didn't look at her. Just watched the wind ripple the tall grass. I had a debt to someone who's never coming back, he said, and because no one else would. She nodded slowly. You think I should go back someday? Only if you want to. I don't know who I'd be there. Boone's voice softened. Then don't go back to who you were. Go forward into who you're becoming. They stood there a while longer, side by side, watching dawn paint the horizon in slow pink brushstrokes. The storm had cleared. A new day was rising. Years later, folks in Widow's Creek still whispered about the girl who refused to bow. Some said she ran off and joined a traveling show. Others claimed she married the preacher's son just to spite the old man. But those were just stories. The truth was quieter. Clara stayed on Boone's ranch, learned to work the land, learned to ride, took over the books. She even built a little schoolhouse down near the creek for the ranch hands' children. Said no one should grow up in silence like she did. Boone grew older, slower, but never bitter. June stayed, too. Though no one ever knew where she'd come from, everyone understood the ranch was hers as much as his. They never spoke of family, but they lived it, and once a year, during the first rain of spring, they moved the furniture aside, lit the lamps, and played the fiddle. And June would hold out her hand to Clara. No words, no smirk, no challenge. And they danced, and they danced.